we're back with another episode of Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from Inside Sports Fantasy Football, the Lakers Fast Break, Game Source, and Pop Culture Cosmos, where we cover the latest news and trends in pop culture each and every week, twice a week, wherever you get your podcasts. Plus, also as well, the Dom-ination Sports Nation. Check out the Lardieri's as they cover the sports world like no one else, right there for you each and every time out at the Dom-ination Sports Nation. Plus, if you have any questions on lineup changes, trade scenarios, waiver wire, pickups, or anything that you want to go ahead and talk about in the world of fantasy football, please always hit us up on social media, Inside Sports Fantasy Football, of course, isfantasyfootball at yahoo.com or Inside Sports FF on Twitter. It is Gerald Glassford. Thanks so much for joining us. Talking about NFL Week 8. Hopefully your team is doing well. One of my teams, unfortunately, because I could throw out there a mash unit of running backs because I didn't have any running backs to get that were left, only got me a combined total of 5 points. So for once, I unfortunately had to take the L, but my other teams are looking good, and this one normally is too, now that I've got some guys coming back off of buys, looking strong again. I have teams right and left asking me for all my receivers, but they got to go ahead and pay the price before they do. And here today to talk about, should it be time to sell high on some of your players in your fantasy team? He's a good man indeed. He, along with his son, Dominic Lardieri, are the two guys behind the Dom-ination Sports Nation. It is Chris Lardieri. And Chris, great to have you here. Looking forward to another great episode of ISFF. And the thing I've got to ask you first, my friend, trade now scenarios we're experiencing right now in the real league in the NFL, right around the trade deadline coming up in the not too distant future. We're starting to see some moves and transactions being made. But in the fantasy world, the offers are always fun to watch and fun to look at. But who in this scenario should you really be looking at to go ahead in a trade now scenario, my friend?
It's great to be back, Gerald. Thanks again. I think, much like the regular NFL, there's one quarterback who had a nice game this past Monday night, and teams are always inquiring about him, and that's Kirk Cousins of the Vikings. Yeah, I know he beat the heavily favored 49ers, but can he do this the rest of the year? I'm not quite sure. From a big picture perspective, my fear is the Vikings won't trade him, and then without having Justin Jefferson and the weapons he's usually accustomed to, I mean, it was a great game, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he's going to put the stats up he's been doing the rest of the season. Another quarterback, and Gerald, I know we've talked about him so much, not only this year but in past shows, is Tua Tagovailoa. I think he's having a great year. Apparently, when the Dolphins play anyone remotely tough on defense or a winning team, they struggle, but they beat up on the weaker teams. And looking at Tua heading here into the second half of the season, he's going to have some tough defensive matchups. And then, too, there's always that overarching fear. Can he stay healthy with the multiple concussions he sustained over his career? So for me, those are two quarterbacks. While they're performing well now, might be time to sell high.
I know as an individual who has Tua on his fantasy football team, it'll be really hard and difficult to go ahead and trade one unless I have a backup in hand. So if that's the case, my friend, and he is starting for you and you start to get that itch to go ahead and maybe make a move on him, you better have someone who can back up him, who you could feel confident that just in case things go awry, can go ahead and slide into that starter spot real quickly.
Yeah, and if thinking back to my drafts, had Tua been there and I'd taken him, I probably would have had to turn around a couple rounds later and reach really on a number two quarterback who essentially would be a number one on most teams just to have his insurance. If you've done that, kudos to you. Then you could trade Tua. Otherwise, here's hoping you went out there and picked up someone like a CJ Stroud or maybe a Matthew Stafford or someone either in a very late round or maybe on waivers in the first few weeks of the season, guys who I think can be serviceable starters, even like a Jared Goff. If that's the case, then pull the trigger. But if you're a backup, someone like a Jordan Love or a Russell Wilson, maybe not so fast.
Once again, it is Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It is Chris Lardieri from the Dom-ination Sports Nation, along with me, Gerald Glassford. Thanks so much for watching and listening. Truly appreciate you having you here on this beautiful, beautiful day and this beautiful evening right here at Inside Sports and Fantasy Football as we prepare you for NFL Week 8. When it comes to the receivers and the skills players, I mean, running back has been hit especially hard as far as the position is concerned, probably more so than any other year I can imagine playing fantasy football. So if that's the case, running backs are at a premium. And if you have a team with a surplus or a plethora of running backs, which are very few and far between, now is the chance to go ahead and tighten up the rest of your roster on maybe selling high on a couple of running backs that you have on your team.
Yeah, I can see that. We have one team. We have Travis Etienne and Kenneth Walker as our two running backs, and that feels like a luxury these days. In our other league, thanks to the poorly scheduled bye weeks. Thanks, NFL. Last week was brutal, as I know you alluded to. We started Darrell Henderson of the Rams, who up until like last Thursday or Friday, leading up to the game against the Steelers, was on the practice squad on the street. I really can't keep track. So luckily, we got some points out of him, but our other running back options were so atrocious we didn't win. So I think it's a double-edged sword. If you've really got a need and you can afford to drop one of your two starting running backs, great. But if not, I think hold on to him because, as you said, the trend of the year so far is running backs have been thin the last few years, and I think this is the bleakest year I've seen in a long time.
But one area that has an abundance due to the really great emphasis on the passing game is at the wide receivers. So the thing is, you've got a ton of receivers out there that are like either mid tier or upper tier that can really still get you points in a high octane offense, which most are looking like that they're doing as far as the passing is concerned. But the really high end wide receivers, sometimes you may be best to go ahead and move one of them. That way you can go ahead and make your roster a lot healthier with a whole bunch of receivers and running backs you can get for that just that one or two big time receivers.
Yeah, if you can get yourself a quality starting running back who's getting most of the reps for a high end receiver, I would definitely do it. We lost Justin Jefferson to IR. He's going to be on it, I think, a total of 4 weeks. And we thought, oh, this doesn't bode well for our team. Well, lucky for us, Josh Palmer and Josh Downs of the Colts are out there, and they've been doing pretty well as they slide into starting roles due to injuries on their NFL team. So there are so many opportunities out there on waivers to grab guys. We got Puka Nakua in one league in week one. Everyone thought he was a fluke. And even with the return of Cooper Kupp, he's been producing. So each week, do your homework out there on waivers. Look to see if someone's hurt, if maybe someone's moved up the depth chart. You can look these stats up. They're starting to get more targets, those sorts of things. Stash those guys on your bench because as we head into the last month or so of the season, you're looking to make your playoff push. These guys that went undrafted can help you win games.
Once again, it is Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It's Gerald Glassford along with Chris Lardieri right here from the Dom-ination Sports Nation. We truly appreciate you watching and listening. One of the things I also want to ask you when it comes to what we're talking about here with buy now and sell high is, of course, the quarterbacks you talked about, the wide receivers you talked about, tight ends are a situation where it is, can we dare say it, Taylor Swift's boyfriend yet? And everyone else. So your thoughts, there's a two or three, Laporte and a couple others that, pretty good, possibly worth investing a trade into because people seem to, depending on the league, some leagues you don't need a tight end as much as others, but in leagues that you do, it could be vital to have a decent tight end, Chris.
Yeah, definitely. We got Mark Andrews in one league, and if that's a third place team, I mean, Lamar Jackson's always had a good rapport with them, and that's continued this year. So, like you said, I know Taylor Swift's man is the cream of the crop, but there are some nice options below that. He set the bar very high for sure. We got Evan Ingram off waivers a few weeks ago in another league, and I think he's put up some solid numbers. So, like you said, if you're forced to start a tight end, there are options out there. And remember, too, you don't just want to. I've had this happen in previous years. You go out there, our tight end stinks. Let's just stream him. There's never anything on the waiver wire. You might get a guy that has a nice week 1 week, and then he'll go dormant for three. So I think you're better off having one of the guys that are, I don't want to say above average, but they might not be in the Kelsey stratosphere, but they're going to produce week after week. So it's kind of like kickers. You want to get points out of them. You don't want to just have it as a wasted position.
Once again, it is Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Truly appreciate you joining us. Also here today, good man indeed. He is the madman from Toronto. He did get out of Toronto traffic and also watching the NBA to go ahead and talk some fantasy football with us. I know I probably had to like a crowbar get him away from that TV seat, away from Victor Wembanyama and all the thing going on with the NBA right now. It is the Magic Man, Sean Grice. Great to have him here, part of our awesome coverage for the Lakers Fast Break, including a special telecast that he put on tonight covering Victor Wembanyama's debut. Magic Man, great to have you here. The topic is sell high, trade now candidates for you. I know Chris mentioned some at almost every skill position already, but when you look at it right now, if you're someone that has got a team that needs some fixing, who would you look at as far as some trade now candidates that really you think could go ahead and be the best thing for you to trade now and sell high upon when it comes to fantasy football, my friend?
You know what, Gerald? I was looking at their schedule coming up, and honestly, if somebody has AJ Brown and they need to make some good moves, I might dangle somebody like that
Good
t- t-
point.
to try and hedge off those pesky fantasy gremlins that always seem to be stalking one of us. Um, Aside from him. Yeah, like the name you just mentioned, Gerald, Travis Kelsey, that would be another one. I realize, he's Pat Mahomes' best friend, but if you need to make up some ground somewhere else, dangling him also might net you what you're looking for as well. We said sell high on Jared Goff, Gerald. I think we're not quite there yet. I still have faith in him, especially his next couple weeks. But if somebody's on the fence, maybe you should sell now. But I wouldn't, because we've talked about this before, Gerald. Goff is a good bet week to week.
We've also talked before about Puka. We dedicated an episode to Puka, and he is still producing even with Cooper Cup coming back to the lineup, which is the scary part about this, Chris, is that we all thought, oh, Cooper Cup's coming back. The numbers are going to go in the toilet. They haven't gone in the toilet, my friend. Puka is still as deadly as ever.
Yeah, he is. And, we mentioned this on that episode a few weeks ago. Sure, Puka's numbers will go down. He's not going to get targeted so much by Stafford, but he'll still produce. Well, he's exceeded my wildest expectations. And I wonder too, on the flip side of that, Gerald, is Cooper Cup someone you deal now?
Good
I know
point.
he's had a couple good games, but then he's got periods within games where he just kind of disappears. Is it he's not 100%? Is it that defenses are saying, hey, you're not going to beat us. We'll let this Puka guy do it if it's going to be anyone. So I know the Eagles were successful with that in the second half of their victory out at SoFi. So could be another one to consider.
Absolutely. Great point indeed. Once again, it is Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Thanks so much for joining us. Magic Man, again, Chris has pointed out it everywhere of need as far as running back, wide receiver, tight end, and quarterback that he would think about selling high. Is there anyone else that you have in mind as far as who you think is a definite sell now, trade now, sell high candidate?
Hmm. can't believe I'm going to say this, Gerald, but
Oh,
I'm
here
going
we
to
go.
say it. I'm going to say it. Josh Allen.
So Josh Allen, he's someone that I actually have on one of my fantasy football teams. I can't say I blame you because he's not producing as high a level as he was last year. The consistency is not quite there. Although, you know what? Mediocre Josh Allen right now is better than 90% of the quarterbacks that are out there right now. So it's a thing where he does even just his mundane la di da games are still better than most everybody out there just because of the fact he runs for touchdowns, he passes for touchdowns. Sure's interception ratio is a lot higher, his yards per game is a little lower, but still, Magic Man, he is a prime candidate if you have a decent backup, like we were talking about earlier, Chris and I. If you have a decent backup, you have that ability to go ahead and trade now on him.
Absolutely. I would also if you have anybody with Devontae Adams, I would just inquire. Just
Good point.
inquire.
Because Jacoby Myers as a backup, or not a backup, he's a slot receiver next to him. But if you've got him on the team like I do, I think you're right. This could be something just is unhappy about his location, even though in the real world he's not going to be traded. Of course, that's what the Raiders tell us now. Maybe a week from now, or at least from the deadline, may say differently. But that's a good point because you have a player that is being heavily targeted. A couple of weeks ago, he was zoned. The defense on the other team zoned him and really shut him out. So you could see somewhere where you're not going to get quite the numbers that you're expecting from a Devonte Adams, Magic Man.
Yeah, absolutely, Gerald. Absolutely. Um, it, it's like a couple guys. It's really surprising. Like Devonte Adams and T.J. Hawkinson. You would think that in the red zone, those two guys would be top 5, top 10 target guys. But I mean, they're so far down the list. It's really amazing how far those guys have fallen, Gerald, as far as red zone production. Um, Adams more so because I mean it's can be hit or miss with Cousins, right? Especially with his tendencies. But yeah, the Adams situation. If you can find somebody who's willing to let go of him, and you think that the opportunity is right for the taking, do it. Do it because I have a feeling that it'll bode well down the road.
Also here today, good man indeed. You got to go ahead and check him out anytime he's part of our show, the Lakers Fast Break Podcast. It is Joe Sorrell from Simblades with a Y.com. And Joe, on your fantasy teams right now, which of your players do you evaluate as a trade now, sell high candidate?
Well, as of right now, probably no one, but I did make a trade a few weeks ago, and it was probably not a popular one because you never trade a good receiver for a quarterback. But I was having some issues at quarterback with Dak Prescott, and I I didn't know what to get. I didn't know who to get, and in one of my particular leagues, I just couldn't get any productive quarterback off the wire. It was too much. It was turning too much into the defense and kicker type thing where I would have to revolve the quarterback like that. I didn't want to do that. So I had a trade. I did a trade for uh wow
Wide receiver for quarterback.
the Niners receiver. Jesus.
Samuel.
I meant Debo Samuel. Jesus. Too much basketball today. Sorry, guys. So Debo, I had Debo, and I needed a quarterback. And the thing with Tua is he's got so much talent around him. All he has to do is do a hitch route or a slant, and all of a sudden it's 70 yards for a touchdown. So I said, okay, if I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna just take this chance. And I know that Debo has an issue with injuries, and of course, look what happened. So I was able to make that trade, and it turned out to be a really, really good one. And that team is really strong. The one fantasy football league that I really desperately want to win is one that I've been in for years, and I've come up second 3 mother effing times. One was one of the worst losses in a championship game you could have. Number one, that idiot in oh my God. The receiver for I'm sorry guys, I'm burnt out today right now in basketball. Beckham.
OBJ, yeah.
OBJ. He punches the crazy man in Washington. I'm sorry guys, I'm like totally gone. No, it was a Norton, not Norton.
Rivas?
Remember the cornerback in Washington?
Oh,
that was
Josh Norman.
Josh Norman. Panthers. Yeah.
So Josh Norman taunts him and he punches him. He gets suspended the next week.
Yeah.
I end up scoring 71 points in the championship game. Guess how much my opponent scored?
72.
82.
Oof.
Oh.
Better than 72.
I was seriously sick for 2 weeks thinking about it. I was so pissed off at myself for caring that much. It made me more sick. It's like, you know how when you think something's wrong with you, you get more anxiety.
Psychosomatic. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Joe, by the way, that happened to me once. There was a time where my chest was like tight for a couple months, and I'm like, what the hell's wrong with me? This never happened. And I go to the doctor. This is a funny story, Sean. You'll like it. I go to the doctor, the emergency room. They do all the tests. By the way, man, oh my God, it was the hottest hottest woman I ever saw in my life. That came in the room, and I'm just sitting there looking at her like, holy crap! What?
Yeah,
right. And then I get out after that kind of, I was.
I wonder why Joe's health insurance was really high on his premiums that year.
I get out and I'm waiting for the little bugger to come out with their portable, I don't know, maneuverable computer thing.
Yeah.
And the guy goes, "Yeah, you got nothing going on. We did the whole ink thing and the EKG, the whole thing." It's like, "Yeah, there's nothing wrong. Oh, by the way, do you know you got a crack in your sternum?" And I started busting up laughing. My senior year in high school, I played football in the cold. And it was tackle football with no pads, playing with friends. And I sacked the quarterback, and the tip of the ball fell perfect on my sternum. My sternum was sore for a year. A year. I didn't know if I cracked it. I didn't know anything. All I knew was it was sore for a year. Well, it turns out that I actually cracked it. The guy could see it. And, of course, the diagnosis was, "No, there's nothing wrong with you, Joe." As soon as he told me that, I never had that elephant on my chest pain again. So back to fantasy football. Sorry, I kind of digressed there. Right now, 2 of my leagues are looking really good. My third one.
I think we're all wondering about the hot doctor. I think is about what you.
Hey, Gerald, you probably would have liked her because it had a little bit of Eastern flavor, little Filipino look. But I gotta admit, man, I seriously, it was like it was a thunderbolt. I just could not. I had to, and you know what made it worse? You know what made it worse?
Joe, looks like you could use a towel.
No. You know what made it worse? She was the sweetest, nicest. Like, she came in there, professional to the tilt, and just absolutely phenomenal. In terms of just the caring part, there was an aura of how much she cared. You know, because sometimes you run into these doctors and it's like, "So, what's the problem?" You know, nothing like that. And maybe that helped, by the way. Maybe that was what kind of jumped up whatever it was, right? But again, going back to fantasy football, 2 of my leagues, I'm feeling very, very confident right now. The third one, I cannot get a damn running back. I can't get a second running back. And I don't know what I'm going to do. I have no idea what to do. I have Josh Allen at my quarterback. I have Walker as my first running back, which was just good, but I cannot find a second running back. I'm using second and third running backs. Atlanta, Miami, like it's terrible. My receivers are unfortunately Devontae out in Philly. The other is Glenn Davis. Gray Davis.
Gabe.
Davis, sorry. My tight end is Gobert, and then kickers and defense are always switched out. So I'm teetering on that one. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but I'm going to try to see if I can get lucky if there's a second. I did put in a waiver claim for Henderson, so I'm hoping that goes through.
Well, there you go, indeed. But what are your thoughts on players that you think are a trade now scenario or someone that you should really sell high on? Please let us know. ISFantasyFootball at yahoo.com or Inside Sports FF on Twitter. Before we get to our picks for this week and woof, 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 take another trip to the doghouse, I want to go ahead and talk about a little bit about a team that we thought the demise might be there, might be happening, but for the Kansas City Chiefs, looks like the same old, same old. Took a little while to get started, especially for Patrick Mahomes. But Chris, I'm going to bring it back to you. Your thoughts, my friend, on the KC Chiefs, despite not having a top-tier wide receiver anymore. Tyreek Hill is obviously finding greener pastures for the aforementioned Miami Dolphins, which we talked about earlier. Right now, the Kansas City Chiefs, again, yeah, it's a whole bunch of Taylor Swift's boyfriend, Travis Kelce, but it's also a lot of other things. And Patrick Mahomes is, I think, finally, for the first time this season, really starting to really find his groove.
Yeah, he's gelling with a lot of these no-name receivers. My initial thought, Gerald, when you brought this topic up earlier today was, well, it's simple. The Chiefs traded back for McCole Hardman, and he was clearly the missing link, right? Now they figured everything out on offense. I honestly think it's a function of Pacheco has, last year he wasn't the starting running back, came on strong late. I think that really helped them. They've got him going since the beginning of the season, so you can't just key on Mahomes now. And secondly, and I'll bring this up because I snagged them back on waivers today, the Kansas City defense has been the unsung hero of this team. They've kept them in games as the offense struggles. They'll force turnovers when they need to, and I think that definitely helps. In previous years, the Chiefs are going to have to outscore you to win, and now they know. All right, we get a little bit of a lead. Maybe we take our foot off the gas a little. We run Pacheco. We do short passes. We eat up clock, and we defy the opponent to beat our defense. And that's what they did to the Chargers this past Sunday.
That they did. And Magic Man, do you think you can continue to count on not just the Kelseys and the Mahomes of the world, but the Pachecos and also the receivers? That seems to be the big deal right now, are the receivers and the running backs for Kansas City right now. So it looks like, that Mahomes and Kelce are as good as they can get and are number one right now on the fantasy football charts. But who do you go to for wide receiver running back help from Kansas City? And do you count on them on a weekly basis?
Second part of that question is no, Gerald. Man, like Sky Moore can have a game where he has like 5 catches at 140 yards, Gerald, and then he could drop like 3 makeable catches that he could take at least 1 or 2 house calls for. That'd be the only guy I would see off that roster because it's so, as you said, it's almost a week to week thing now with Andy Reid finding what matchups him and Pat prefer, and obviously Travis Kelce is the first option and the safety net as well. So other than him and Pacheco, I'm with Chris. Heads or tails, given their personnel, what they're, who's going to eat week to week is a variance, I think.
Joe, when it comes to the Kansas City Chiefs, wanted to hear your thoughts on this. Mahomes looks like is about as good as money right now. As far as right now, he's finally starting to play come into his own. He's now taken over as the MVP leader in the clubhouse here in Vegas. What are your thoughts on, obviously Kelsey is a number one regardless. He's actually better than most of the receivers out there right now, simply said. But is there any chance that you take on some of the receivers or the running backs that are not named Kelsey or a quarterback, any other players inside Kansas City outside of Kelsey and Mahomes? Go ahead, Joe. I got you on right there.
Sorry, yeah. I don't think so. I was waiting to see if maybe Sky Moore might be someone that could kind of come out of the ruckus, maybe even Rashid Rice. And even the staples like Hardman and I just Patrick Mahomes. If the Kansas City Chiefs, even if they go deep in the playoffs with this kind of setup, is there any more? Can you really deny that Patrick Mahomes is not the MVP again?
Yeah.
I know Kelsey's great, but he's still a tight end. And I know he plays like a receiver, but he has no receivers right now. This is the first time in the 6 years he's been playing where he has no. I don't even know some of these guys are number 2 receivers. So in the long run, it might be something that they have to kind of understand. You're talking about a quarterback that probably takes up 1/3 of your salary cap, and then you have a tight end that takes up another big chunk of that. And Andy Reid is such a genius play caller. It looks a lot like how New England was running things, because when you have a great quarterback, do you really need like that elite receiver? If you have a quarterback at this magnitude, you had Gronkowski, you had Aaron Hernandez before he went the way he went, and maybe that's enough. You didn't have a running back either. Pacheco's okay. McKinnon is okay. As long as you got that gunslinger and at least one major weapon somewhere, I think that's all they care about. And then, of course, if the defense is going to continue to play well, maybe they win the championship this year with Mahomes and the defense.
We'll see what happens.
I think that's what's going to happen, guys. And then this is the residue of paying your quarterback more money than anyone in the NFL. And this is a hard cap, right? This is not a situation where you can sign any of your players like in the NBA for whatever they want because you have their bird rights. This is a hard cap. You can't do that. So it's going to be one of those things where Patrick Mahomes will only add to his legend at this point. If they don't have to win it all, but man, if he takes this crop of receivers to the AFC Championship game, even if he loses, he's still the MVP to me at that point, because this is one of the worst receiving cores I've seen in the last few years. There's nothing there, no one. And you would think they would. You got the best quarterback in the NFL. These guys should at least get something out of it, but they're that bad. They're that bad.
Well, we'll see what happens, my friend. But yeah, right now, Kansas City looks like they're on the top. They're regained their form, especially on the offensive end. And even without star running backs and wide receivers, they are getting the job done indeed. But before we head on out, guys, it is week 8 in the NFL. Chris, I will hit you first on our fantasy football picks. What matchups intrigue you most if you're a fantasy football owner this weekend in the NFL?
Well, I was looking forward to the Bengals 49ers game, but now with Brock Purdy in concussion protocol and the 49ers seemingly beat up, I don't think Sam Darnold would excite me as much. Although I will say, with the Bengals coming off a bye week, I'm curious to see what they do. I mean, I don't want to say it's a must-win game for them, but it is important. And if they're going to be contenders, they got to beat teams the likes of San Francisco to prove their worth. So that one stands out to me. And then, I picked them last week. I'll eat crow on it, but I think the Lions on Monday night against the Raiders, if they don't light up this defense, I don't know what will kickstart their offense. So My gut tells me Goff and company will get back on track Monday night. So I think that's pretty much on paper a boring game. I'm Sean. No offense to your team, but I think you'll also agree. But from a matchup perspective, if I had Lions, I would start them. But at least we got some good matchups. At least if you're a football fan to watch this week. I mean, Jags and Joe Steelers, I think will be a good game too.
Well, I can't say I blame you on that one, especially after the way they got embarrassed. They were riding high, a little bit too cocky, a little bit too confident. Detroit was when they walked into a buzzsaw like they did last weekend. Magic Man, that's obviously a very safe bet. Sorry, and apologies to all the Raiders fans out there, such as yourself. But conversely, if they go all out, that could leave some spots open for the Raiders. But the thing is, who's going to get the great wide receivers Jacoby Myers and Devontae Adams the ball?
Well, it's not going to be Brian Hoyer.
Might have to be you or I.
I would not play quarterback for the Raiders right now for all the whiskey in Ireland, Gerald. I value my life too much at this point to put it in the hands of that cockamamie, whatever you call it, offensive line. Oh my God!
They're only as good as the coaching behind them.
Chris, you don't need to apologize for pointing out an objective truth. The Raiders are the worst 3-4 team in the history of the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I was hanging out with a good friend of mine who was a Raider fan last Saturday, and I'm like, look, even with a rookie quarterback, you think you guys should beat the Bears. Well, I put the kibosh on that game, but my condolences on that loss. That was brutal.
Mm-hmm.
So, Magic Man, what
just a drop in this crab bucket called being a Raiders fan.
Oh, you mean a drop into this trash bucket being a Raiders fan? Okay, there you go. Absolutely. All right, my friend.
I will, Chris. We got screwed last week. We both, I thought we both made a good gamble on the Colts, and the NFL referees decided to intervene. And
yep.
But we called it, ladies and gentlemen.
So let me ask you this before
Chris
I get
was very accurate.
So let me ask you this again before I get it to Joe, who answered this week's question so far from our audience. Your thoughts on the best fantasy football matchup you think right now?
Yeah, Gerald. So I know Chris mentioned a couple games. I'm looking at Tampa Bay and Buffalo, and it's possible the Bills just run a train on them and win by 30. But I also think it's possible that Tampa Bay just grinds this out to the very end and gives Buffalo another scare. I would be shocked if Buffalo didn't come out with a sense of urgency, Gerald. If you're dropping to 4-4, you're really hanging your hat on a great second half, and their schedule it's pretty bad in the second half. They play a lot of good teams, so I would really look at taking the Bucs this week because I think the Bills are just going to come out and play very, very nervous.
The audience out there, Queek, welcome to the show, Queek. Truly appreciate you watching and listening. Joe, he traded Kincaid for London. Any thoughts on that, my friend?
Kincaid got the ball a lot last week.
That he did.
I don't know if that's going to be a norm. I don't know if that's going to be something. At this point, I'm thinking it's a lateral move. But I guess if you're going to have to pick between the two, I would have gone with London.
He already has Ingram.
Yeah. I think if I had to put a vote, I think that's a good trade.
Okay. Chris, concur or?
I agree. And not only because I own London in one league, but I like that he's got you mentioned he's got Ingram cinches it for me. And then two, the cynic in me is hoping that Ritter finally gets benched and the great Taylor Heineke, former Washington quarterback legend, gets a start because I don't think he could be any worse than Ritter, and that would bode well for London.
There you go. Absolutely. So, all right. I agree with these guys. I think that's going to be a great move. Getting Drake London, I think it really is going to help the team. So I will say right now that that I think that that's a pretty good move out there. He said he traded Kincaid for London. I think I'd stick with that as well. But before we head on out, guys, no worries. Queek, anytime you need your stuff answered, please let us know. Drop it in the comments below on YouTube, or you can let us know, isfantasyfootball at yahoo.com or Inside Sports FF on Twitter. But before we head on out, guys, you've taken a look at the lines from NFL Week 8. You know it's that magical time again as we step outside on the lawn. The weather's still nice outside, 70s and 80s in many places along the U.S., like here in Vegas, for instance. Really nice weather until it gets cold for us, like probably next week or so. But we go out into the lawn, we look over, we see everything's been manicured, been taken care of, mowed lawn, everything's great. But oh my gosh, woof, 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 we've got to head over to the doghouse. So, Chris, NFL Week 8, you're looking for the dogs, you're seeking them out. What are your thoughts, my friend, for your dog of the week in the doghouse?
Oh, be sure to dodge all that stuff the dog left on the front lawn last week in the form of my Lions pick. That game was over, but right after it started, there were a couple
There's
lines.
a lot of poop there.
Yeah, to say the least. There are a couple lines that stood out to me. Joe Steelers at home getting 3 against the Jaguars. You know, I always love my home dogs. Then I looked and I saw one line earlier today. It was Bengals getting 5.5 at San Francisco. Clearly, that was assuming Purdy's playing. The line is now Bengals getting 3.5. I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to take them. If Darnold does start, I think the Bengals can win this game outright. If not, we all know the 49ers kicker is questionable. So maybe a missed field goal or something comes into play. You got that extra half-point cushion. In honor of my friend Vincent back in New York, huge Bengals fan. He traveled out there to see them beat the Seahawks 2 weeks ago. I'm going to pick the Bengals and hope I get off the crap wagon with picks this week.
Woof, woof, woof. Magic Man, your thoughts? Any underdogs that really stick out to you this week in the doghouse? Go ahead, Magic.
Yeah, Gerald, thank you. I wouldn't go with the. Well, yeah, I guess I'm gonna have to. The Jets and Giants. I see the OU is 36.5. Is that what you have, Gerald?
Right now, what I'm looking
I
at.
gotta get close.
Yeah, it is 36.5. Yes, that's what the line is. Right
that's a lot. That's a lot. Like Vegas is really holding out hope that both New York teams score like a 21-17 game. That's a high scoring affair for both
and
of them.
That's the second lowest total right now.
That's going to be 9-6.
Yeah, it's going to be like a 12 to 9, a 14-12 game winner off who's the Giants kicker? Graham
Gano, yeah.
Yeah.
Could be worse.
Yeah.
I call him Graham Guano.
Yeah, so go with the Jets. Sorry, Chris. It has nothing to do with the Giants. It's just both teams are abysmal.
They shouldn't even gotten that win last week. The league should take it away. Oh wait, the refs tried to do that the week before. Sorry. But yeah, they didn't deserve that win.
But yeah, Gerald. Go with the under in the Jets Giants game because there's no way that's going to be a boat race.
Joe, any thoughts on a pick for this week for the doghouse?
Huh. I'm thinking because of this, what have you done for me in the last Sunday mentality that started after the blowout win by the Ravens. And now apparently Lamar Jackson is the greatest quarterback that ever lived in the history of quarterbacks. I'm going to pick the Cardinals to upset the Ravens, which is kind of a dumb pick in a way because Lamar Jackson apparently has only lost one game against NFC teams. I think he's 17-1. But with that, I'm like, well, I think he's due a loss. And they got to travel to the West. Typically, that's not a good thing for an East Coast team to do.
30 teams who play in the Mountain West, which is Arizona and Denver, have a 36% win percentage. So
and Arizona,
something there.
Arizona has a weird mountain time. They switch, or maybe they don't switch, but California.
Yeah, they keep the time.
Makes them a mountain time during the year, right?
Yeah.
So I'm picking the Cardinals to upset the greatest quarterback that ever lived this week in Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. And I am going to watch as much as I can of the Giants-Jets game because I do miss my defenses. And I think we're going to get a good defensive show in those 60 minutes.
I'm also thinking
pick the Jets. Pick the Jets defense if you can. By the way, on that one.
Prop bets, yards per play under 2.5.
But under a half.
Well, again, it could depend. It could depend on the refs, guys. It could be, the refs could make an offensive, or I should say, a defensive pass interference call that keeps the defense on its heels, and then
here's the thing: how are the refs going to determine who the home team is? Yeah, the Jets are visitors on paper, but they're both home teams.
Okay, so tell me something, Chris. Tell me something, Chris. When it's in this situation, is it going to be Giant heavy or Jet heavy?
In theory, it would be Giant heavy because it's a Giant home game, and I'm sure you'll have your smattering of Jets fans too, but I don't think it's going to be the case of where you get one of these games like we saw at SoFi last week, where I don't know if you were there, but it was a Steelers home game. I mean,
yeah, but they're different. The Steelers are one of the greatest road.
No, but what I'm saying, it's not like the Giants fans are all going to bail and sell their tickets to Jets fans. It's still early in the season. It's not December or an ice storm.
Okay, all things considered, the Giants have more fans than Jet fans. Is that
yes, correct? Yeah. And a lot of it has to do with geography. A lot of Giants fans live closer to the Meadowlands or not as far out in New York as Jets fans did, because back in the day they played in Queens. So there's your geography lesson of the day.
So
that's good.
I will add mine in there. I really think that even though that Justin Fields is not in there, I think that the difference for the Chargers at 8.5 is just too much for them. I would say the Bears is the underdog, 8.5. Take the 8.5. But if the Chargers don't win by that amount or larger, again, we've talked about the hot seat for the Chargers head coach all year. I think this will, if they don't get a definitive win, I think they'll just make the seat even hotter right there in LA. But before we head on out, Reborn Juggle 173 is asking for JT or Olive this week at ROS. They play each other this week. Chris, I'll start with you, my friend.
Oh.
You're asking great questions out there.
Yeah, it's a tough one on the spot.
Olave spent a few hours in the local New Orleans jail, so
in the clink,
I would go with JT.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'll go with him even before that great tidbit from Sean, just because I think he's trending upward.
So there you go. What was it for? If I may.
Don't drive 70 in a 35 in a school zone.
Well, that's not too bad. That's
in
fine.
A school zone, Gerald.
No. The obviously that in a school zone. Yes, you're right. That's bad. But
it's
as far
really
as
bad.
It wasn't drug related or wasn't
no.
That's long standing ramification.
Yeah, I'm sure
it's a bad deal.
Yeah, I'm sure he had a young lady with him in his Dodge Charger.
But it wasn't it wasn't a DUI or it wasn't drug related.
Just driving too fast, trying to impress the young girl.
Yeah, he's young. He's just okay. Obviously, that's not what you want to do. And I'm not trying to. I was just asking. was it health related? Was it something that's
no, it's
these days when somebody goes to an athlete goes there, it's usually something a lot worse than that. So, but you're right, it might be a distraction for him. Come this week, because he's probably going to be answering a lot of questions from the media. So it definitely could be a big time distraction for him. But yeah, Reborn says me and his friend are just arguing. Olav's having a legacy game. He showed up to practice in a shiesty. So yeah, that could be right there for you. That's what Reborn says. So yeah, definitely some great thoughts. Great shout out. Alex Flores says, pick one. Who does he go with? Flex full PPR, Joe, on this one. Henderson, Waller, Najee, or Hopkins? And Sean, you can weigh on this too, my friend, if you want. Henderson, Waller, Najee, or Hopkins for a flex full PPR?
That's a good one.
Great questions this week.
So you've got to check to make sure Henderson's not still on the practice squad, because McVay's been playing games this week. Pay attention to that.
I don't think he is.
My guess
because Williams is still on the IR.
Yes.
No, Henderson's playing from what I'm hearing. Yeah,
Henderson's
playing, and
he was briefly put on the practice squad Tuesday, and no one knows why. Just double check, but that's looking.
I can't find anything on that. So let's say
by process of elimination, I go with Hopkins.
Problem is, who's going to start for Tennessee?
I'm going Henderson if he's playing. If not,
I agree. If it's Henderson, play him. Otherwise, then the only thing I'll say is Waller got targets. You gotta.
I never trust Waller.
Yeah, I know that, but at least with the other two, he's the lesser of those three evils. But I would just keep an eye on Henderson. Make sure they play, like Schefter caught on. He was playing games with the depth chart last week. My son was awake when he saw it, and we snagged him off waivers. So it's a never-ending saga with the running backs with the Rams. Who's going to play?
I see, according to CBS Sports, as of 2 days ago, like you said, on Monday he was put back onto the practice squad. So I don't know. I don't see any changes on that as of right now.
So maybe they're going to start Freeman.
It looks like
that's what they did. They shifted Freeman back to the roster. So I don't know. It's
even
still
though
early.
66 yards and the touchdown doesn't quite do it for you. So,
but maybe there's some technicality in the Rams and want to pay him a meal allowance for a few days. I don't know.
Just very, very curious. Absolutely, I agree with you. So if you decide to go with Henderson out there, make sure he is actually on the active roster. Great point indeed. Also, make sure you've got all your coverages out there, for buys, guys getting off of buys, guys being put on to buys. So go ahead and make sure you check out your roster before Thursday night's action. But guys, it's been a great episode. Great questions from our audience tonight. I cannot thank you enough for stopping by and just telling us your thoughts tonight, and some great questions indeed. ISFantasyFootball@yahoo.com or Inside Sports FF on Twitter. If you do have more questions, waiver wire questions, trade questions, and more, go ahead and let us know. Starting lineup questions as well. But Magic Man, Chris, and Joe, great to have you here. But any last thoughts, guys, before we head on out? Excited for NFL Week 8?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So for us, follow me on Twitter at Cressell Sports, on Instagram at Dom-ination Sports Nation. Dom and I will be discussing, is the NFL really mediocre and no one's noticed? On top of that, we'll be doing our World Series preview. I will not make any outlandish predictions and say I'm going to retire if the Diamondbacks win. I won't do that. And then, too, Dom, especially fired up over the start of the NBA season, put on the TV to see Wemby's debut, and he's on the bench. Gerald informed me he's in foul trouble, but we'll actually have some basketball to talk about this week.
He had a better second half, but they did the El Foldoac in the final seconds and gave up the final, 9 points, Sean, I think?
That's right, Gerald.
Yeah, it was 118 to 117, and then you turn right around, it was 126 to 118. Just like a young team to choke a lead like that. But interesting, the rookies, for the most part, outside of Wemby's second half, did not fare that well this evening. That's the thing I take away the most. But if you want to go ahead and catch all the NBA thoughts and action, please check us out. Lakers Fast Break, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube. Subscribe today to Pop Culture Cosmos and Lakers Fast Break to get the latest notifications on when we go live in the air with the latest Lakers Fast Break. Oh, one last question to get in before we head on out. Super CNB Challenge is back. Should he trade away Ravens D for Eagles D? Ooh, man, these are good questions this week. He likes the Ravens D better, but their playoff schedule is worse. Joe, I'm going to hit you with this one first. Sean is already shaking his head no, but Joe?
Honestly, guys, my defense is a revolving door.
You just scream your defenses.
Yeah, I can't. I don't trust any defense out there. The NFL, Chris, you mentioned, is the NFL mediocre? Yes, it is. It's absolutely mediocre, and there is not a deliberate fix, but I believe that the referees have a habit of keeping games close for the sake of entertainment purposes. And to me, if there was any way we could prove that, I don't think it will matter. I think people will watch the NFL even if they're rotting corpses. But the game the kickoff is an absolute just disgusting embarrassment. I don't. At this point, just get rid of it and figure out another way to make it make sense to me. And then, of course, the refereeing and third down calls, fourth down calls that sway the momentum so greatly. And then, of course, defenses are the main effect when that stuff happens. Because then as soon as that happens, they're on their heels and they never really come off it. So Super CN, I would stick with if I was going to pick a defense to roll with every week, it would be the Eagles D.
I agree. Look at their December schedule. They get the Giants twice, and even if it's a game where, they rest everyone, they get the Giants twice. So right there is a plus, and I just agree with Joe and Sean too. I mean,
Chris.
you got a good defense, ride it. But if you want to get ahead of yourself and look ahead,
there was so much promise this year, man. What happened?
So we could do a whole show on it. So
is the apple in the Garden of Eden Evan Neal, Chris?
I think he's this generation's version of what Robert Gallery we said, Tony Mandarich, you name it. So I don't know what happened there. Guy is clearly a bust. He can't even play the tackle. They're talking about moving him to guard. But separate of that, I mean, Justin Pugh was literally on his couch and said so during the intros in the Bills game on Sunday night, and due to injury was a starting left tackle at the end of that game. So they didn't address the offensive line. Look, going into last season, I would have been happy if the Giants
was Pepe Le Pew that game.
Pretty much.
I mean,
but they never addressed the line, and they completely overachieved last year. So they went into free agency and kept Jones, even though he played a game of chicken. And now we're looking and we're like, oh, look, Tyrod Taylor is not great, but he's a hell of a lot cheaper for the productivity we get paying Daniel Jones $40 a year.
And Magic Man, so final call, my friend, on the thoughts on the trade?
Yeah, I agree with Chris and Joe.
Hey, Magic, I hate to say, I hate to bring this up, but I have to because Chris brought up Robert Gallery and Tony Mandarich. Oh my God. This is gonna hurt, Sean, and I'm sorry, but I gotta say it because I noticed it a few months back. When you look at the 1989 draft and the 2004 draft, you have, I'll start with the 04 draft. Eli Manning, number 1. We saw what happened there. Gallery at 2, right? We saw what happened there. Then it's Fitzgerald, Rivers, Sean Taylor, Kellen Winslow, Roy Williams, DeAndre Hall. Everyone in the top 8 except Gallery made the Pro Bowl.
All pro.
Now it gets worse. It gets worse here.
Sean, I know.
Please come. I gotta say it because again, I know you're a history buff. I know you know this stuff. 1989, first pick is Troy Aikman, Hall of Famer. Tony Mandarich picked second. Granted, it went to Green Bay, but then you have Barry Sanders, Hall of Fame. Derek Thomas, Hall of Fame. Deion Sanders, Hall of Fame.
Wow.
Just
That'll tell ya.
absolute travesty. Again, I know you're not affected by the Green Bay one, Sean, but it's just, again, I'm talking about when we're talking about the NFL and the decision making and all that stuff. It's just like you picked the one guy out of the 6 that was a bust, and everybody else made the Hall of Fame. So yeah, it's a tough one.
Well, I'll tell you what, though, great show. You guys are awesome. Again, please go ahead. Any questions for us? isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com or Inside Sports FF on Twitter. But make sure you check out Dom-ination Sports Nation with the Lardieri's, Chris and Dom. And make sure you check out the Magic Man, Sean Grice, Joe Soro, and myself on the Lakers Fast Break. But for everyone out there, you have yourselves a very good weekend in fantasy football. And of course, we'll see you next week right here at Inside Sports Fantasy Football.